but we're very happy to have Sheri Jones, president of the Measurement Resources Company, based out of Columbus. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the author of Impact and Excellence. And Sheri will be here to present on maximize your impact, turning data into dollars. And I think we'll just go over some strategies you can use and data you can utilize to manage both your financial and mission outcomes at your nonprofit, I believe, no matter what size nonprofit you are. So, and very happy to have kind of a mixed match of those on the call today in sizes here. And before we get into the presentation though, I did want to quickly, like I said, plug our Networking at Noon event that's happening next Friday, obviously at noon. That's going to be a virtual event that is going to be held through a program called Remo. That's going to allow all the same kind of fun, speed dating-like business networking like we would have in person in a virtual event. So that detail is up on our calendar. And if there are any nonprofits interested in joining us for that, it is priced very competitively at only $10 for that experience. And we mathematically make it so you never see the same person twice, and it's just a lot of fun. So with that, I think I'll kick it over to Sheri to start the presentation today.
Great, thank you, Matt. Well, it's wonderful to be with you all, whether you're here listening live or going to be watching the recording later. I am excited to share what I am most passionate about, and that is how do you use data within your nonprofits to drive impact and strategy. So I'm grateful for this opportunity. Many of you may not know me, so let me introduce myself. I'm Sheri Chaney Jones. I'm the president and founder of Measurement Resources Company. I'm also the co-founder of a company called Surelmpact, which is a technology software that helps nonprofits as well. And for the past 20 years, I have been working almost exclusively with government, nonprofits, social enterprises to help them better measure and communicate their impact and value. Prior to founding Measurement Resources Company, I had a stint in state and local government, but really doing the same thing, evaluating the impact of government programs and nonprofits that we funded. So I'm going to share a little bit about that story as well. And I'll share my journey on what got me out of the Levesque Tower, if you're familiar with Columbus, and into your computers today as well through this conversation. But my passion, my mission is to help you use data to solve complex social problems and drive social change. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What I do know is that if you are working in the nonprofit sector, chances are you have a giant heart and your purpose here on earth is to make a difference. And also what I may know is that there's probably a large percentage of us listening in that the word data, it sounds intimidating. You might have chosen your career path because math wasn't your favorite subject. Statistics weren't necessarily what lit you up like it lit me up. And so let's reframe that. Let's strike that word data from our vocabulary, because after all, we're here to make a difference. And let's use some different words that feel a little less intimidating. So when I'm talking about data, I don't just mean what like we think about this mysterious big data that we've seen in the world. No, let's talk about knowledge, input, figures, evidence, details, proof, metrics, right? Facts. These are words that are a little less intimidating. And when we say that word, that's what we mean. And how do we embrace these numbers? How do we embrace this evidence to tell our story and to drive social change forward? So why is it so important that we embrace this? We have to stop resisting using data in our organizations. We have to embrace it. It will determine your destiny. Especially now, as we are living through this pandemic, as we will have the aftermath of what will come when recovery starts. But data is required for all of these things: to attract more funds, to improve more efficiency, to get more positive press, to increase community engagement, to enact policy change, and more importantly, to create lasting and sustainable impact. We have evidence that all of these things are important for your organization. And so we need to embrace data, because if we want to grow, if we want to increase our impact, if we want to increase sustainability, we need to use our data strategically make sure we have the right metrics and we're communicating them in an important way. And not just I say this, we have some other research in the fundraising realm that shows us the importance of this. Penelope Burke has done some research that has shown us the growing importance of results and how donors now are more favorable in seeing metrics and impact and measurable results than they were just 7 years ago. So 67% now favor not-for-profits that communicate measurable progress on what is being accomplished with the donations they make, up from 36% just 7 years ago. So that is more than doubled the amount of donors who will want you to demonstrate your impact to them. And what's very interesting is that her research has found this is regardless of gender, age, or value of gifts that they're making. So whether they're making your large major contributions or your smaller donations, people are going to want to see these measurable results. And so we also need data because it's going to help you increase your sustainability. If we think about it, in the world of COVID, a lot of the ways that we used to fundraise aren't available to us. You know, we have to reimagine how we get our donors engaged with our work. So we think about our traditional, we're gonna throw a great gala, have a good party, and maybe we can get people in the door just to buy a ticket because they want a fun party, or they want to get in the door because they might meet that key celebrity that you have as your keynote speaker. We have less of those opportunities now. And we also know that we need continuous operating support to support our missions. And what's very interesting is more than half of all funders who provide operating support do so through a competitive process. So there are those coveted grants out there where you can get operating support dollars. They're not specific to a program, but in order to attract those, you likely are going to need to compete for those grant opportunities, and those funders are going to require you to have outcomes data as part of the selection criteria. So we definitely need data. But the problem we find is that most people are unsure where to start. It's not that they don't want to use data or they don't think that they need data. There's so many questions. We get so many questions from audiences like you where they're like, we don't know what are the best measures? What should we be measuring? When should we be measuring? Once we have the data, how should we analyze it? What should we do with it? What skills do I need, or who do I need to hire to help me do this? So these might be the same questions that you're wrestling with. You understand the importance of data. You know that you need data and outcomes to be more successful, but there's just so many questions. And often when there's so many questions, we don't know where to start. It stops us in our tracks. So the good news is you're in the right place today. You're listening to the right presentation, because we are going to talk about answer a lot of those questions to help you really understand, making sure, evaluate what you're doing right now in your organization. And you can ask yourself, do I have all the measures I need? Should I be doing something else? Maybe you have everything you need and you just need to communicate it in a different way, or put the metrics in a different way. So we're going to share all of that with you today. And the good news is it is not as complicated as you think. I'm sure you're sitting here on a Friday afternoon or mid-morning and like, I don't know if my brain can take a series on data, but it's really not as complicated as you think. And that's what I want to share with you today, that it is actually quite easy. And when we share our tips and our tricks and our tools and our strategies, often nonprofit executive directors and leaders come back to me and say, really, that's it? Yep, that's it. It's not as complicated as you think. We just need to underline some basic principles to get you there. And another good news is that you have what it takes. So some research that we did in my book, and I'm going to share that in a little bit, but I wrote a book called Impact and Excellence, and it's based on original research that I conducted about 10 years ago. And I looked at over 200 and some nonprofit organizations. I looked at what data they had, how they were using that data, and what results were they getting because of it. And what we found was that organizations that had data aligned with their mission were significantly more likely to achieve outcomes. But what we also found was that there was no correlation between the size of the organization, the budget of their organization, and their ability to collect data, use it strategically, and drive social change. So what that says to me is that it doesn't matter if you are a giant organization or a small startup, one-person nonprofit, you have what it takes. It's not so much the size and money. That, like we said, our research shows that that does not matter. The one factor that predicted if an organization was going to be able to create what we call high-performing measurement cultures to attract more funds to their organization, the only predictive factor in that was the commitment and willingness of the leader. So congratulations, that's you. And so what we're here to talk about today are what are those mindset shifts that you and your team need to embrace in order to take the knowledge and the skills to implement these in your culture. Because it really came down to creating a data-driven culture and the leaders committed to this effort. So it's not complicated, and you have what it takes. Those are the first two ingredients, and if you adopt those two principles, then everything else that I share with you this afternoon will be easier, I think, to implement. So this is where I want you to go. And I want you to really think about your own impact statement. When you're writing a case for support, or you are sharing your mission with a funder, think about your own impact statement, if you will, and evaluate where you are on the spectrum. So as I mentioned before, I used to be a government funder and had a lot of nonprofits writing to me, asking, not me personally, but to my agency, asking us to fund their program through government grants or contracts. And let's say you're given one of the two answers when asked, what is your impact? So we've got our outputs only statement of impact, where a very lovely, well-meaning nonprofit says, hey, we provide recreational youth to 100 services to 100 underprivileged youth. Well, that's great. I'm glad to know that you're serving underprivileged youth. I'm glad to know you're providing them recreational services, and you've given me a sense of how many children or youth that you've served. That's great. But let's say I get the same application, I get, same competitive bid process, and the other organization writes to me and says, well, we provide recreational programming. We also have served 100 youth, and we've improved on average their reading comprehension by 2 grade levels. We've kept 99% of the at-risk youth we serve in school and 100% out of the juvenile justice system. And for every $500 donated, the lifetime earning potential of one child is increased by $289,000, which is a 57,000% return on your investment. Well, I don't think it's much of an argument which program that grantor is going to choose to give the grant to, if they had to make a choice between one or the other. And so what I want to share with you today is, how do we get to tell that outcomes-based impact-centric? That's where you want to be. So again, make sure you're writing notes, you're taking notes during this presentation, but kind of do a self-check, an evaluation, if you will, of what kind of story can you tell? Can you talk about how you're changing lives and changing circumstances with quantitative numbers? And then if you can do that, can you go even farther and talk about what is that social return on your investment for your community? And we're going to walk through a couple case studies of how real world nonprofits just like yourself have been able to make the shift from an outputs only type of quantitative metric of impact to an actual more outcomes and impact focused statement. So here's the data I wanted to share with you. I gave you a little bit, a hint of the research in my book, Impact and Excellence, but these are the results that essentially got me from the Levesque Tower as the Performance Center Manager with the Department of Aging to become Found Measurement Resources so I could take this message to the world. So like I said, I didn't tell the story yet, so I'm going to tell a story, quick story time. Back when I was with the Department of Aging was very similar to the economy we have right now. It was 2007, 8, 9, 10. We had significant budget cuts. And so if any of you are funded with state programs by state funds, just know next year might be a little rough because in Ohio, we must balance our budget, meaning that we are unable to spend more money than we receive. So when tax revenues are down, when businesses aren't as prosperous, the state has less money to give to social programs. And the Department of Aging was no different. We ran a passport program that kept seniors in their own homes with using Medicaid dollars. So in Ohio, if you're sick enough and you're poor enough, you're eligible to receive care in your own home at the state's expense. And we knew this program was better for seniors. We also knew that it was better for Ohio and Ohioans because the program had better health outcomes for the participants in nursing home level care. And it also saved our state $250 million a year in Medicaid. So at this time, of course, like we're seeing right now in the state budget, the governor was asking us to make draconian cuts to our budget. And we knew the passport program was on the chopping block, or at least significant cuts in that program, which we also knew was seniors' lives. We knew that if we didn't have the funds, then more seniors would have to move out of their own homes. So I developed at the time this thing called the long-term care savings calculator, which essentially proved that our program saved the state $250 million a year in Medicaid if it were funded at the level in which it was funded in previous years. And we socialized that with media, governor, policymakers, anyone who would listen. And at the end of the day, we received all of our money back, and which in a state budget cycle is almost impossible to do. And the reason I share that story is because that was the beginning of the journey I'm about to share with you. So I looked around though, because we had such success. We got our money back, yet everyone else was struggling and dealing with so much pain. And I look at our nonprofits that we funded through our passport dollars, and I thought, why aren't they telling us their impact story? They'd be so much more successful. We could be so much more successful if we had this data. I also looked around at our sister agencies, and they weren't telling their impact story. And so that's when I felt the call to leave state government and start measurement resources so I could help as many nonprofit and government agencies as possible use their data, tell their impact story to increase their mission and their impact. But at the time, I was a government employee. I was an industrial and organizational psychologist and had a really good government job. I wasn't an entrepreneur, a speaker, a trainer, all the things that I would define myself as today. And so I did the only thing I knew how to do, and that was I launched an unfunded market research study. I created what was called the Measurement Culture Survey. I sent it to, at the time, about 200 local government and nonprofit organizations. And the assessment basically measured what data do you have, how are you using the data, and what results are you experiencing? And that was what I looked at. And the results that I found were so compelling that I knew if they held up, I needed to tell the world about this. Everyone needed to know about these results. And so then I launched a national unfunded market research study to broaden my sample to get a more representative sample. And the results held up, and here are the results that we found. So essentially, we have our impact and outcome driven organizations. Those, if you're looking at your screen, those are our red organizations. So those organizations have data aligned with their mission, and they're strategically using data to make decisions. Then we have our blue bars, which are output only organizations. And so they're more of that, oh, I can tell you how many people I served, but we really don't, we're not internalizing it. We don't have a strategy for how we're using it. We'll share it with our funders because they're asking for it, but it's not part of our strategic operations. And then our gray bars were we have no data to drive decisions at all. I don't know how they're making decisions. So as you can see, that across the board, our impact and outcome data-driven decision-making organizations were significantly more likely than the other two groups to achieve all the different outcomes that you want to. They had greater efficiencies. So how you'd read this chart is that 87% of our impact and outcome data organizations had increased efficiencies versus 37% of our output only and 12% of our no data. So if you move yourself to an impact and outcomes data-driven organization, you are likely to experience increased efficiencies, better external relationships, so relationships with your funders, policymakers, donors, other community partners, media. You're also to have greater internal relations, better cooperation, communication, collaboration, as well as increased revenues. So it's the hidden success factor. This is why I'm so passionate. This is why I do what I do every day, because I want every nonprofit organization to become an impact and outcomes data-driven decision organization. And like I mentioned earlier, it's because our data showed that there is no correlation between size, budget, and ability to achieve this. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How do I move you from an output-based organization to an impact and outcomes-based organization? If you're curious to know where your organization stands on the Measurement Culture Survey, you have the opportunity to take that for free. I invite you to go to measurementresourcesco.com. You'll see where you can enter your name and email, which will give you a link to take that Measurement Culture Survey. And what happens when you do that is it assesses you, and then you get a benchmark report. So on all of the different factors that we assess, you'll have your score and then everyone in our sample score with some recommendations on what you might want to focus on to increase your organization's capacity and to become more impact and outcomes driven. So I invite you to do that, as well as you'll get the first 2 chapters of Impact and Excellence, which will allow you to check it out, read the research we found, and everything I'm going to share with you today, or well, not everything, but a lot of the principles I'm going to share with you today are also explained in more depth in the book. So why impact data now? Well, I think we've already successfully shared this, but you cannot afford not to do it. Unfortunately, especially in our current financial climate, the reality is the cost of doing nothing could really hurt you. We've all had to pivot. Maybe a year and a half ago, this statement wasn't as true because you could still maybe rely on your relationships or your marketing or your great gala. But unfortunately in 2020 and likely in 2021, those strategies are not going to be as successful for you. So we need to be telling our impact story. That's what's going to get you standing out above the crowd. Also, we all have limited precious resources. And when we have the right outcomes and impact data, we will know how to use those resources wisely. It will also allow us to be the industry leader. I'm going to tell a story here in a minute about one of our clients who became the first in their community and in their field to talk about their impact story. And now everyone else is chasing them because their story was so compelling that their funders went back to their other, I hate to say competitors because we do all collaborate in the nonprofit field, but the reality is there's also often competitive grants, so would go to their competitors and ask them, well, how do you measure impact? And they didn't have a way to do it. And so the way this agency was doing it became now the standard for how all agencies in that community have to do it. So you might as well set the stage and let everybody else start to chase you. And then of course, it's going to ensure that you have financial stability to do the work that you need to be doing in your community. So first lesson, we need to make sure that we have 3 primary types of data. So if you're taking notes, you will want to write this down. So we need to have what was done. Most nonprofits are pretty good at talking about what was done. So these are your outputs. These are things like how many people did you serve? What kind of services did you provide? How did you provide, Who did you provide those services to? We're pretty good at keeping these types of data, the what did we do, the outputs data. But we need to go beyond that. We also need metrics around how well it was done. So those are more of our quality level data. And why this is so important, we've now done research with home visiting programs, programs serving individuals with HIV, programs serving youth homelessness, as well as primary care seeking behavior. So we have 4 different populations, and these were 4 different studies, and we all came to the same conclusion though in these 4 different studies, was that outcomes, meaning the positive change that the clients received through these 4 different programs with different populations, was directly correlated to the client's perception of the provider's quality metrics. So in our case, we were looking at things like cultural competency. So did the provider, did that nonprofit's workers respect the individual's culture and meet them where they were in their own circumstance? And another key driver of outcomes was, did the provider come at a helping relationship? So the perception was that this person is here to help me, not to judge me, not to shame me, not to be better than me, but they actually have my best interests in mind and they're here to help me. And I think this is really key, especially if you're a social service nonprofit, because the people that you serve do not necessarily pay full freight for your services, right? So that means that value and revenue are not intertwined. So unless we ask our customers, our clients, if we are meeting their needs and if we're providing value, we may totally be missing why we're not moving the needle, why we're not driving the outcomes that we want to drive. So we need to make sure we have that customer feedback, that customer satisfaction in our work. And then lastly, how are participants, how are communities, how are businesses, depending on who your services are to, how are they better off because of your services? Because again, I can't stress this point enough, and often board members miss this, because our board members often come to our nonprofit organizations from a for-profit mindset. And in a for-profit mindset, value and repeat business or increased revenues are directly linked. Because if you deliver value to your customers and you're a for-profit, they buy more, they tell their friends buy more, right? So you can use increased sales and increased new business as a direct kind of proxy for your delivering value to your customers. In the social sector though, that is not the case a lot of times. A lot of times, the individuals who are receiving your services are not paying for them. So therefore, that whole kind of feedback loop is missing. And so just getting more people into our doors does not mean we are making anyone better off. So we need to make sure we have our outcome data. Outcome data can look as, are you improving health outcomes? Are you increasing earned income? Are you increasing stable housing, right? I mean, you all have a variety of missions, but it's really what the whys you do what you do. What are you hoping to change because of your work? So we need to have those 3 types of metrics. So I mentioned I was going to share a story about my dear friend and client, Lori Leibel-Humer. She is the executive director of Western Youth Services, which is out in Anaheim, California. And when we started working together in 2015, she had a very significant mental health agency, behavioral health organization serving youth out in Anaheim, probably around 10 or 11 million. So definitely not a small startup by any means. But what she came to me and she's like, I know we're doing great work, but I personally want to change. Right now, 1 in 5 kids have a diagnosable mental illness. My mission is to change that to 1 in 10 in this generation. Like, just loved her vision, loved her boldness, and this was what she wanted for her nonprofit to achieve. And she said, I know that if I don't measure it, if I don't quantify it, I can't achieve that goal. So we came together and we helped her transform her organization to be more impact-centric. So she could know for sure at any given time how her organization was moving the needle for those young people. And as a result of starting to talk about her impact, tell her impact story, her organization is now around a $16 million a year nonprofit. So they've raised essentially $5 more million annually since being able to tell their impact story. So we then were like, okay, what makes an organization like Lori special? What made her say, I know my funders aren't asking for this. Now they are, because she's changed the culture of her whole entire system. But that mission statement, that vision statement I have on my wall, I mean it. I mean it, and I know that if I don't measure it, it will not get done. And I'm committed to measuring it. So what made Lori and the other, not just Lori, but all of these other high-performing leaders that we've had the opportunity to work with, what made them different? And so these are the measurement mindsets that we've kind of pulled from them, and this is what they believe. And if you think about psychology, and did I mention I'm a psychologist by training, but a lot of this has to do with our own mindsets. And that is that our behaviors follow our thoughts. So if we want organizational systems that are going to help us measure and drive outcomes and achieve those results that we want, increased revenue, efficiency, sustainability, improved relationships, if we want that, we've got to work backwards on how to get there. So we want these outcomes. So we know we're going to need to change some structures. We're going to do something. We have to do something different, because if we do what we always have done, guess what? We'll get what we've always gotten. So if we don't like our results, we need to do something different. But in order to do something different is going to require us to have change. And we don't change until we've changed our mindset, because our behaviors follow what we believe. So here is a hack. I'm giving you a hack. I know you thought you were going to come and learn all about data, and you are, but I could teach you everything I know about data, statistics, analysis, measurement. But if you didn't have these 4 measurement mindsets, it wouldn't go anywhere. We would walk away from each other. I'd call you in a year and nothing would have been implemented. So that's why we're starting here today, because without these 4 measurement mindsets, you're not moving. We know this now. After a couple decades, I've learned this to be very true. So measurement mindset 1 is it's a tool that makes our lives easier and leads us to what we want. So we have to believe that. We have to believe that if we don't measure it, it doesn't matter, right? There's that expression, or what we focus on grows. That is very, very true. So the high-performing leaders that we see that are able to adopt these impact measurement cultures, they care about tracking impact so they can create more of it. It's not a compliance thing. It's not a big brother thing. It's hey, we're here to solve this big problem. And if we track it, we can do more of it. You want to individually improve as a social sector professional. So you yourself are committed to being a thought leader. You yourself are committed to being the very best that you can be. And you want real-time data collection and proper analysis, because when you have that, it saves you a lot of time and resources and increases your efficiency. So this is you have to kind of adopt this belief in order to implement these practices. Measurement mindset 2, that in today's world, it is essential for my nonprofit's survival. I'm not going to lose out on funding for not achieving positive outcomes. More and more funders are asking for, as I shared with Penelope Burke's research, it's not just government funders anymore. It's even your individual donors. They are asking for impact data. And I don't want any organization on this call to lose out of key funding because all of a sudden your funder decides, you know what, we're moving to an outcomes-based funding model. Our next grant round, you're gonna have to show us what your outcomes are. Maybe they haven't asked that in the past, but they're gonna start asking that. If you already have these systems in place, if you already have this data, you're ready. Boom, you've got the grant. If you don't, you're left out of that cycle and you're now scrambling to catch up. Don't scramble to catch up. You need to be there for your community. You need to be there for your constituents. And having an impact-centric organization is key to survival, not just now, but into the future. Measurement mindset 3. Data literacy is a critical job skill today for me and my team. It is. It's just a reality. Our world is always evolving. It's always developing. And now data literacy is something we need to invest in. It's something we need to train on. It's just critical. I'm going to pause and tell a funny story here. I have 4 children, all under the age of 14, and they teach me so much. I'm sure your children teach you so much too. But I had aha that this was going to be so true from now until the rest of my life, that data literacy will be a critical job skill. When I think it was my oldest son was probably around 7 or 8 years old, just starting to get old enough to go explore our neighborhood on his own with his friends. It's probably maybe 8. And there is you guys are all from Central Ohio-ish, so you understand this. It's not a scary thing. But there was, by their school, there was a drain culvert that had like one of those circle kind of circle things. Sewer, I mean, we call it a sewer, but I used that analogy in New York and that didn't fly. People thought I was letting our children play in the sewer. That's not the case. You know what I'm talking about. It's just the culvert for the water drainage. So anyway, they were exploring that back behind their school. And he came home and he was telling me the story. He's like, Mom, it's really cool, but it's really long and it's dark and it's scary. And so will you Google the sewer maps? And I was like, well, I Googled the sewer maps. And then it hit me that my, 8, 9-year-old son thought that you could find everything on Google, including the sewer map for this suburban neighborhood. And I just realized that for the rest of our lives, for every kid or generation after us, this is their reality. And so if we as leaders today don't embrace the technology that we have, we don't embrace the ability that we can know how many people like us like that, we understand impact, immediate impact all the time. We need to get on that bandwagon. So whenever you think about needing to up-level your technology skills and embrace data, just think about my son who needed me to Google the sewer maps. Unfortunately, I was not able to do that for him. But our ability as leaders, we need to be able to collect, manage, evaluate, and apply data to solve challenges. It's just what we're going to need to do now. We have the data. It's our responsibility. When we know better, we do better. And it's going to generate improved outcomes faster. Why wait? You have people in your community who need your services. They need you to be doing the very, very best that you can do, because you don't want to wait another generation to solve that problem. You don't want another family to have to go through another cycle of poverty, do you? So use the data you have to improve what you do, to become more efficient and effective. So we just have to realize that this is something, if we don't have it, we have to invest in it, we have to learn it, we have to hire it, we have to do whatever we need to do to have it as part of our organization. So I mentioned a little bit around measurement resources and the work that we do, and we're trying to make things even easier for you and your teams to ensure that you're having these high-performing cultures, these impact and outcome cultures. And that is through a technology called Surelmpact, which is in connecting the entire social sector ecosystem. So everything I talked about, what do you do? How well do you do it? How people are better off? And giving you and driving those insights all the way from client centricity up to having that as a funder and a collaborator to be able to understand the collective impact of your story. And so just recognizing that your work is done in an ecosystem. It's not siloed, because what you do, because remember, the clients that you serve, they likely are served by a lot of different nonprofits in your community. Maybe they go to the food bank. Maybe their youth are involved in a sports program. They're in your local school systems. They're, maybe they're served by the court system. Maybe they're going through a business accelerator program. So we're all connected into the work that we do with one individual, and we can't assume that one service is going to completely transform our community. We all need to be working at the highest impact possible in order to drive social change. And so that's what Surelmpact is. It's a technology that is bringing all of those organizations together to give them those insights. So if that's something that you're interested in learning more about, feel free to just go look that up at surelmpact.com and see how we're using technology to change the social sector and help you be more data-driven, more efficient and effective. So here are 3 keys for moving towards an impact-centric organization. So you'll want to write these down. We'll also send the PowerPoint out afterwards. But again, this is a great place in my presentation for you to start to think about how well are we doing at this? Where do we, kind of go through these 4, think of it as your checklist, if you will, to assess how well you're doing. So the first is you need a clearly defined outputs, outcomes, and impact metrics that align with your organization's unique mission. So, most people have those outputs. Those outputs, again, is what did you do? So how many people do you serve? What are their demographics? What services do you provide? How many services do you provide to them? Outcomes are often a little more tricky because every mission is different. There are days where I get very jealous of CPAs and accountants because there's your general standard accounting principles, and they can just give you a presentation and say, well, you need to know how to read a balance sheet, you need to know how to run a profit and loss statement. Like, there's very structured ways to do that. In the social sector, it's a little more tricky because how we're going to measure housing success is a lot different than how we're going to measure workforce development success, which is a lot different than how we're going to measure educational success or youth development success or early childhood education success, right? So there will be different metrics for different organizations. We have been blessed to work with all of them and have created a measurement framework. Basically, what are the best practices for measuring different outcomes in each of the different sectors? And we have put it into our Surelmpact Measures library. So if that's something you want to have, I'm going to give you an opportunity to schedule a call with me at any time you want, so we can just have that one-on-one conversation around what would be the right metrics for your specific organization, because depending on your mission changes how you would measure outcomes. But one of the key things that I tell organizations to start having this conversation is ask yourself this really simple question. Why do you do what you do? It's not scary. If I were to ask you what are your outcomes, organizations often get really scared and it sounds like a scary question. But if I say, hey, why do you do what you do? You start talking and opening it up. And chances are that those whys, those are your outcomes. Improve literacy, improve housing, increase business success, whatever it is that comes out of your mouth when I say, why do you do what you do? Those are your outcomes. And you want to ask yourself, am I quantifying them? And then as well as how do you then translate that into like a social return on investment? What is the cost or savings to the community that they receive because you're achieving those outcomes? So that's the first thing you need to do. Once you've done that, you need to have effective and efficient systems that are incorporated into the natural workflows of your organization. Because we could work with you and we could create a measurement framework for you and it would be great. And you would have a really great, like, yay, these are what we should track. But if it's not, if the ways you gather that data and use that data is not incorporated into your own organization's culture and budget and workflow, it won't get done. Because it will feel it'll be something else we have to do. It'll get put on the back burner. So we always ask that, if you need to see change, you probably need to collect some data at the beginning and some data at the end. So make sure you have that at the intake process, you're collecting data. At the outtake process, you're collecting data, or maybe you have a follow-up survey and you're letting your clients know, hey, we're gonna send this follow-up survey that we need you to answer. And that it's naturally incorporated into your processes. So once you have those 2 things, then the third thing is so key to continue the culture going. So that is a timely data reporting and communication with staff and stakeholders. We see data-driven cultures die when leaders come in, they're all excited, they say, hey, we're gonna track these new outcome measures, this is how we're going to do it. They get all the buy-in, and then maybe 6 months later, no one has ever seen a report or heard of a report. And so then they think it doesn't matter. They're like, we don't know how you're using the data. We don't understand why it matters. So you need to make sure you have regular communication and feedback loops to talk about what are your findings, what are your learnings, you know, how are you improving or growing or changing because of this data. And so that leads us to number 4. You need to make sure you have processes for making these data-driven improvements and validating and celebrating the effectiveness that you have. One caution of creating a high-performing organization is that we often have the habit of forgetting to celebrate our successes. Are you guilty of that? Have you ever had a performance review? And let's say it's on a 5-point scale and you had all 5s, but that one thing your manager gave you, let's say a 4. And what do you go home and talk to your spouse about, your partner about? The 4, right? You don't go home and say, hey, I got excellence on 6 domains. No, you go home and you complain about the 4 that you received, and you're just in your head, you're like, how could I have gotten a 4? And high performing organizations are no different. Once you have data, you have to make sure that you don't just always focus on the things that you can improve on. As a leader, you have to be intentional about celebrating the good, because that will motivate your team to continue to do better, to continue to stay around. Because if you just focus on the things that need improved, then people will feel like they're never moving ahead. So make sure you, as a leader, that's your responsibility, is to celebrate success and use data to improve processes. All right, our last mindset, number 4, is technology will take you to your destination quicker. Embrace the technology. I see so many nonprofits not wanting to invest in the technology that's going to help them create an impact-centric organization because they perceive that, well, I'm a nonprofit, I don't have a lot of money, we can do it manually. You can do it manually, but I promise you, it's why we developed Surelmpact, because when there is a manual process, it will fail. Jane, your data person, will leave. And now all of a sudden, oh, I don't know, that was Jane's job. I don't know what Jane was doing, right? So technology is gonna help you do the data analysis for you. It's gonna ensure you have quality and clean data. It gives you real-time insights. You can track trends over time. And it just takes the worry about it. So that's another mindset thing you have to embrace, is that technology is your friend. We're living in 2020. We need to embrace technology to make sure we have an impact-centric organization. And so, like I said, we created Surelmpact to help you create these high-performing cultures, to help you manage and share your data to demonstrate your impact. So if that's something that resonates with you, I do encourage you to check that out. So one last case study I want to share with you before we, I guess there's a few of us, I can open it up to a couple questions if they're theirs, but I want to talk about ACT Anaheim and how they were using shared data and Surelmpact to transform how they served youth in Anaheim. So ACT Anaheim was a collective impact collaborative focused on youth in California. And so we had like Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers Big Sisters, a behavioral health organization, some multicultural like ESL type programming, some youth civic engagement and youth workforce development programming. So a variety of different youth serving organizations, but their overall objective was to improve the quality of life and success of the young people in Anaheim. So one of their challenges is that as a collaborative, because the funder wanted them to come together, work together, and tell their collaborative impact story. So the data sharing piece was one of those, I guess, biggest hurdles that they had, but they were able to use Surelmpact to overcome those data sharing decisions. So they were all able to track what they were doing and how well they were doing it and share outcomes in a secure and shared space. And it helped them increase efficiency because they could see who they were make referrals back and forth to each other to see what overlap and how together they were serving youth better, which allowed them to talk about how collectively It's not just the after school program's job to be successful. No, it's the school and the after school program and the behavioral health team and the academic and recreational programs, right? It takes a village. It takes us all to come together to improve the lives of kids. And then it also helped them understand, how were they not collaborating well? Where were there the silos to continuously improve? So that's what I wanted to share with you today, the different mindsets that we have to embrace to understand we're going to use data and become an impact and outcome-centric organization. The 3 types of data we need: what did you do, how well did we do it, and how are people and communities better off, as well as the 4 factors that we need to create in order to create a data-driven culture to increase our sustainability. I know some of you are not live today and aren't able to ask me questions, and I know many of you, your questions are probably very, very specific. It's like, well, this is my mission and this is what I need to measure. So I do invite you to schedule a free 30-minute sustainability analysis with me, and we'll just get on a Zoom like this and we'll talk about your specific mission and you know, how you're measuring impact and where you can improve. There's no catch. It's just a way for me to dive deeper into your organization to help you continue this work, because I'm so passionate about it. I love to have those intimate conversations with people that I can't really address on a quick Q&A. But I do have a few minutes if there are any questions that you would like answered for those of you here live on the call. And if there are none, I'll just give it back to Matt.
Thank you very much, Sheri. Awesome job. And this really actually speaks very much to why I ended up in the role I'm in. Was definitely, I'm a data-driven person, and it was a presentation back when I was actually a couple semesters from becoming an engineer. I attended that. I just saw what the impact of data can do on the social side, the nonprofit side of a nonprofit I was working in. And I just fell in love with public policy, and it drove me in a completely different direction, and that's how I ended up here. But I'm definitely, I get the.
You have a very similar story then.
I get the need and the amazingness that data can help with. But any specific questions for Sheri here today? If not, again, thank you very much, Sheri. Yes, like you said, we'll share your contact information and these slides with everyone here today on the call, and then of course those that are going to be joining us via the recording. And yeah, we will hopefully see some of you folks at the Networking and Noon event next week, and then gosh, into the next year. And we wish everyone is very safe and happy holidays. I can't believe it's already December. Crazy. We're almost through 2020, and we'll get through 2021 together as well. But again, great to see everyone here, and thank you again, Sheri, for a great presentation.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you all.
Have a good weekend. And go Buckeyes.
Go Buckeyes.
Thank you guys.
Bye.